He was a titan of industry, a man who could move markets with a whisper. But the one person he failed to see was the woman sleeping beside him. To billionaire Alistair Hawthorne, his wife Madeline was just another beautiful acquisition, a quiet and graceful ornament for his lavish life. He ignored her ideas, dismissed her passions, and paraded his indiscretions in front of her confident. She was too timid to ever challenge him. But he never thought to ask about the secrets she kept locked behind her gentle smile. Tonight, at his spectacular annual charity gala, in a room filled with the world's most powerful people, he's about to learn that the shadow he cast for years was the perfect place for his wife to build an empire of her own. The silence in the Hawthorne penthouse was a specific kind of loud. It was the sound of unspoken disappointments, of conversations that died before they began, and of the vast, marble-floored distance between two people sharing a life, but not a connection. Madeline Beaumont. For 5 years, Mrs. Alistair Hawthorne knew its every nuance. She could trace its echoes from the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city to the cold, minimalist art Alistair had chosen for the walls. The art, like everything else, was an investment chosen for its projected value, not for the soul it might possess. Madeline was in many ways just another piece in his collection. He had pursued her with the same relentless focus he applied to a corporate acquisition. She was an art history graduate working at a small, respected gallery. He'd found her intelligence and gentle nature a charming novelty, a respite from the sharp-edged, ambitious women who typically vied for his attention. He'd called her his serene sanctuary, but sanctuaries by their nature are meant to be quiet, to be still. And for 5 years, Madeline had been just that. Her days were a meticulously scheduled rotation of charity luncheons, board meetings for foundations where her only role was to smile and nod, and fittings with designers who dressed her in the image Alistair preferred, elegant, understated, and utterly safe. Her opinions, once the very thing he'd claimed to admire, were now treated as mild interruptions. "I was thinking for the Hawthorne Foundation Gala this year," she began one evening over a dinner they rarely shared. "Alone we could highlight emerging artists. We could dedicate a wing to showcasing their work, give them a platform. It would align with my background and bring a fresh energy to the event." Alistair didn't look up from the financial report on his tablet. "The gala is for our established donors, Madeline. They want to see Warhols and Rothkos on the auction block, not canvases from some unknown kid in a warehouse. It's about prestige, not energy." He waved a dismissive hand, the gesture so casual it was almost crueler than a direct insult. He wasn't arguing. He was correcting a child's naive suggestion. The conversation, as it always did, evaporated. His neglect wasn't always passive. It had a sharper, more public edge in the form of Bianca Valenti. A sleek, raven-haired socialite with a viper's smile, Bianca was everything Madeline was not: loud, ostentatious, and unapologetically transactional. She was the vice president of marketing at Hawthorne Industries, a position Alistair had created for her. It was a poorly kept secret that their professional relationship extended far beyond the boardroom. Alistair would laugh at Bianca's cutting jokes at dinner parties, jokes often subtly aimed at Madeline's quaint interests. He'd place his hand on the small of Bianca's back, a gesture of casual ownership that sent a ripple of knowing glances through their social circle. He did it all under the guise of professional familiarity, but everyone saw it for what it was: a humiliation. Madeline endured it with a quiet grace that was frequently mistaken for weakness. She would offer a tight, polite smile, her posture perfect, her composure a shield. But behind her calm blue eyes A ledger was being kept. Every dismissive word, every condescending glance, every moment, she was made to feel like a ghost in her own life, was recorded in meticulous detail. The upcoming Hawthorne Foundation. Gala was the pinnacle of their social calendar, and this year the tension was thicker than ever. It was the one night Alistair needed her to play the part of the perfect adoring wife flawlessly. The event was securing a massive merger, and image was everything. "Darling," he'd said, finally looking at her a week before the event, his eyes scanning her as if assessing a stock price. "Make sure you wear the sapphire necklace. It projects stability." He wasn't asking her to look beautiful for him or for them. He was instructing her on how to be a better asset. That afternoon, Madeline was in her private study, a small sunlit room Alistair rarely entered. It was the only space that felt truly hers, filled with books on art history, and more recently, economics and corporate law. She was on a secure video call. Her expression transformed. The soft, placid mask she wore in public was gone, replaced by a look of sharp, focused intelligence. On the screen was a kind-faced older man in a conservative suit. "The final block of shares was acquired this morning." "Mrs. Hawthorne," Mr. Peterson said, his voice calm and steady. "The portfolio is diversified, and the holding company is completely insulated as of 8:15 a.m. You are officially the majority stakeholder." Madeline felt a tremor, not of fear, but of power run through her. "And there is no paper trail leading back to me." "None whatsoever," he confirmed. "The Orion Investment Group is as anonymous as a ghost. To the world, it's just another aggressive, faceless fund that saw an opportunity. No one knows it's run by a woman they believe spends her days planning flower arrangements." She allowed herself a small, cold smile. For months, this had been her real life. The lonely nights Alistair was working late with Bianca were her study sessions. The charity luncheons were her cover for discreet meetings. The endless hours she spent alone in the silent penthouse were filled with the thrill of a secret war, a campaign waged in stealth. Alistair thought she was a piece in his collection. He was about to find out she was the collector. And she was coming for the one thing he valued more than anything in the world, his unshakable control. The gala was in 3 days. The stage was set. The catalyst, the single moment that fractured Madeline's quiet endurance and set her on a new path, hadn't been a grand, cinematic betrayal. It was a small, slicing remark, delivered with casual cruelty, that finally broke the spell of her passivity. It happened 2 months before her secret acquisitions began. Alistair was hosting an intimate dinner for a potential business partner, a gruff old-money industrialist named Robert Vance. Madeline had carefully planned the menu, overseen the decor, and researched Vance's interests, hoping to contribute to the conversation in a meaningful way. Throughout the evening, Alistair steered the conversation exclusively to finance mergers and market projections fields in which Madeline was presumed to be an illiterate bystander. When Vance, trying to be polite, turned to her and asked about her work at the art gallery. Before her marriage, Madeline's face lit up. "I was a curator for contemporary sculpture," she began, her voice filled with a warmth that had been absent for years. "My focus was on postmodernist artists who work with reclaimed materials. There's a fascinating movement that explores the intersection of sustainability and—" Alistair cut her off with a booming, indulgent laugh. "Madeline, please. Don't bore Robert with your little hobbies." He turned to Vance, a conspiratorial smirk on his face. "She has a good heart, but her passions are—" quaint. I married her for her taste, not her portfolio analysis. The table fell silent. The air crackled with Madeline's humiliation. It wasn't just that he had dismissed her. He had framed her life's passion as a trivial, childish pastime in front of a stranger. He had reduced her entire identity to that of a decorative object he had acquired. In that moment, watching him laugh with Vance, she saw her marriage for what it truly was. A gilded cage where the bars were made of his condescension. She excused herself from the table with practiced poise, her back straight, her head held high. But once in the solitude of her study, the facade crumbled. The quiet sadness she had lived with for years curdled into a cold, hard knot of anger. It wasn't just about Alistair and Bianca anymore. It was about the slow, systematic erasure of her own self. The next day, she began to dig. She started with her own finances, a subject Alistair had always handled. He'd set up a generous allowance for her, an amount designed to keep her comfortable and incurious. But Madeline wasn't interested in the allowance. She was looking for something else, a loose thread from her past. She found it in a dusty box of documents from her grandmother's estate. Her grandmother, a woman Alistair had dismissed as a simple schoolteacher, had been a quiet, shrewd investor her whole life. Tucked away in a forgotten trust, untouched and accumulating value for over a decade, was an inheritance. It wasn't billionaire wealth, but it was substantial, far more than Alistair could ever imagine a simple schoolteacher possessing. It was a secret nest egg left to her, with a handwritten note. For a day when you decide to build a world of your own. That day had arrived. Her grandmother's lawyer had long since retired, but his firm was still active. With trembling hands, Madeline made a call and was referred to the firm's most discreet senior wealth manager, a man named Arthur Peterson. When they met in a quiet, anonymous office downtown, Mr. Peterson was exactly what she had hoped for. Old school, impeccably professional, and with eyes that seemed to understand everything without her having to say a word. He reviewed the portfolio her grandmother had left her. "Your grandmother was a very wise woman, Mrs. Hawthorne," he said, looking at her over his spectacles. "She invested in foundational tech and biotech long before they were fashionable. This portfolio is not just solid, it's a launch pad." Madeline took a deep breath. "Mr. Peterson, I am not looking to fund a shopping habit or a new charity. I'm looking to make a strategic acquisition. I want to build something, but it must be done in absolute secrecy. My husband cannot know. No one can." Mr. Peterson didn't flinch. He simply nodded, a glimmer of respect in his eyes. He had seen enough of the world of powerful men and their often overlooked wives to grasp the situation immediately. "Secrecy is a service we provide. Mrs. Hawthorne, tell me, what is the target?" This was the moment. This was where the vague sense of rebellion solidified into a concrete plan. She thought about Alistair's world, his obsessions, his vulnerabilities. His latest fixation was the hostile takeover of a mid-sized, innovative green energy company, Helios Innovations. Alistair wanted to acquire it, strip its valuable patents for his own tech division, and shutter the rest. It was a ruthless, predatory move, typical of his business style. But Madeline knew something Alistair didn't. Her father, an engineering professor who had passed away years ago, had been a mentor to the founder of Helios. She knew the company wasn't just a collection of patents. It was a team of brilliant people dedicated to a cause. Gutting it would be an act of corporate vandalism. "Helios Innovations," Madeline said, her voice steady and clear. "I want to buy a controlling interest before my husband can, and then I want to use that position to invest in them to make them untouchable. Mr. Peterson raised an eyebrow, intrigued. This wasn't just a spiteful whim. It was a sophisticated, multi-layered strategy. It was both a defensive move to protect a legacy she cared about and a direct offensive strike at the heart of Alistair's current ambition. "That is a very ambitious play, Mrs. Hawthorne," he said slowly. "Hawthorne Industries has formidable resources." But they are loud about it. Madeline countered, a new confidence sparking within her. They move like a predator, and everyone can see them coming. We will move like a ghost. We will use a holding company, an anonymous entity. We will buy small, untraceable blocks of shares through various brokers. He won't see us until it's too late. For the first time in years, Madeline felt the thrill of her own intellect, the power of her own agency. She was no longer a quaint hobbyist. She was a strategist. The seed of rebellion had taken root, and it was growing into an oak tree of formidable strength, right in the shadow of the man who thought her nothing more than a delicate flower. For the next 6 months, Madeline Hawthorne lived a meticulously crafted double life. To Alistair and their glittering social circle, she remained the serene, almost invisible wife. She attended her luncheons, smiled placidly at board meetings, and nodded along as Alistair pontificated about his business triumphs. Her placid exterior was the perfect camouflage. No one looks for a shark in a koi pond. But the moment she was alone in her study, the transformation was absolute. The room became her war room. The art history books were joined by texts on securities law, market analysis, and corporate governance. Her laptop, once used for emailing caterers, now glowed with encrypted messaging apps and real-time stock tickers. Her partnership with Mr. Peterson was a masterclass in discretion. They never met in person again. Their communication was a complex dance of burner phones, secure video conferences and messages passed through a trusted courier who believed he was delivering rare art auction catalogues. Mr. Peterson, energized by a challenge he hadn't experienced in years, became her tutor and field marshal. Alistair's strategy is a frontal assault, he explained during one of their late-night calls as Madeline sat in her silk dressing gown studying spreadsheets. He's driving down the stock price, with negative press likely leaked by his own people to make the acquisition cheaper. He thinks he's the only player at the table. "Then we won't sit at the table," Madeline replied, her voice low and steady. "We'll buy the chairs from under him." Her plan was brilliant in its subtlety. Through the Shell Corporation, they'd created the Orion Investment Group they began to buy. They didn't purchase large, attention-grabbing blocks of Helios stock. Instead, they executed hundreds of small purchases through a dozen different brokerage firms, always staying just below the percentage that would trigger a mandatory SEC disclosure. It was a death by 1,000 cuts. Madeline learned to read the market's rhythms to anticipate Alistair's moves. She discovered she had a natural, intuitive grasp of strategy, a skill honed by years of navigating the complex and treacherous social politics of Alistair's world. She knew how to be patient, how to wait for the perfect moment to strike. One afternoon, Bianca sauntered into the penthouse, ostensibly to drop off some files for Alistair. She found Madeline in the living room, sketching in a notebook. "Still drawing your little flowers?" Madeline Bianca purred, glancing at the page with a condescending smirk. "How lovely. Alistair is closing the biggest deal of his career, and you're doodling." Madeline looked up, her expression unreadable. The drawing wasn't of flowers. It was a complex flow chart, a map of shell corporations and holding patterns disguised with petals and leaves. "Everyone needs a creative outlet, Bianca," she said softly. The ignorance of her rivals was her greatest weapon. They saw a quiet, artistic woman and couldn't imagine the mind of a predator lurking beneath. The stress was immense, but it was a different kind of stress from the soul-crushing weight of her marriage. This was the sharp, exhilarating stress of high stakes of purpose. Some nights she would barely sleep, her mind racing with numbers and strategies. She would watch Alistair sleeping beside her, this powerful man, so completely oblivious to the storm she was gathering around him, and feel a cold, clear sense of purpose. He had underestimated her. It would be his undoing. The final piece of her plan was about Helios itself. Using an alias, she opened a back channel of communication with Helios's CEO, a brilliant but beleaguered scientist named Dr. Eris Thorne. She introduced herself as a representative of a private investment group that believed in his vision and wanted to help him fight off the hostile takeover. "Hawthorne doesn't want your technology," she wrote in an encrypted email. "He wants your patents. He will gut your research department and fire your team. We want to fund it. We want to see you grow." Thorne, initially skeptical, was desperate. He saw a lifeline. Madeline, through Orion, provided him with enough capital to shore up his company's immediate finances, a move that slightly boosted the stock price and made Alistair's acquisition efforts more expensive and frustrating. Alistair, furious at this mysterious interference, simply doubled down on his aggressive tactics, making him even more predictable. He was playing checkers, convinced he was a king. Madeline was playing chess, and she was already 3 moves from checkmate. A week before the gala, Mr. Peterson confirmed the final transaction. "It's done, Mrs. Hawthorne. Orion Investment Group now controls 52% of Helios Innovations. You are the silent majority owner. The company is yours." Madeline closed her eyes, letting the reality of her victory wash over her. She had done it. She had secretly moved millions of dollars, outmaneuvered one of the most ruthless billionaires in the country, and saved a company she believed in. Now only the final act remained. It was time to step out of the shadows. She opened her closet, pushing past the muted, elegant dresses Alistair preferred. In the very back, preserved in a garment bag, was a dress she had bought herself years ago but had never dared to wear. It was a bold, stunning creation of deep crimson silk that shimmered like liquid fire. It was not the dress of a serene sanctuary. It was the dress of a queen. The day of the Hawthorne Foundation gala arrived with a palpable sense of electricity. For Alistair, it was the culmination of months of work, the night he would unofficially celebrate his impending conquest of Helios Innovations in front of the world that mattered. For Madeline, it was the day the world would be redrawn. The penthouse was a flurry of activity. Stylists, caterers, and assistants buzzed in and out, their movements orchestrated by Alistair's imperious commands. He stood in the center of it all, a king surveying his court, barking orders into his phone. He was so consumed by the evening's performance that he barely registered his wife's presence. Madeline moved through the chaos with a preternatural calm. She approved the final floral arrangements, confirmed the seating chart, and handled a last-minute crisis with the orchestra, all with the quiet efficiency he had long taken for granted. This was her role, the silent, competent manager of his domestic and social life. Tonight, she would play it to perfection one last time. An hour before they were due to leave, Alistair strode into their master suite. Madeline was sitting at her vanity, her hair already styled in an elegant but severe chignon. He was already in his tuxedo, looking sharp, powerful, and utterly self-absorbed. "Is everything handled?" he asked, not as a question, but as a demand for confirmation. He adjusted his cufflinks in the mirror, his eyes on his own reflection. "Everything is in order," Madeline replied, her voice even. He finally glanced at her, or rather at the space she occupied. "Good. Don't forget the sapphires. We need to project an image of unbreakable strength tonight. This merger is as good as done, but appearances are crucial." He saw the sapphire box on her vanity and nodded in satisfaction. He didn't notice the empty space beside it, where the crimson dress she planned to wear should have been hanging. He didn't notice the new steely resolve in her eyes. He didn't see her at all. He only saw a component of his grand design. "I have to get to the venue early," he announced, checking his watch. "Need to glad hand some board members before the chaos begins. The driver will be back for you in 30 minutes. Don't be late." He leaned down, not for a kiss, but to give her a dry, perfunctory peck on the cheek. It felt like a corporate seal of approval. "Break a leg, darling," he murmured, the irony lost on him. Then he was gone, his brisk footsteps echoing down the marble hallway, leaving behind the familiar ringing silence. The moment the door clicked shut, Madeline's entire demeanor shifted. The stillness broke, replaced by a swift, deliberate purpose. She walked to her closet and took out the crimson dress. It was a statement piece, a work of art designed to be seen, not overlooked. It was a declaration. As she stepped into the silk, she felt as if she were shedding a skin she had worn for 5 long years. The demure, understated Mrs. Hawthorne was disappearing, and the real Madeline Beaumont was re-emerging stronger, sharper, and forged in the fires of her husband's neglect. She bypassed the sapphire necklace, the symbol of the stability he wanted to project. Instead, she chose a single, stunning piece of jewelry. Her grandmother had left her a diamond necklace designed like a serpent, its eyes tiny emeralds. It was bold, a little dangerous, and entirely her own. When she looked in the mirror, the woman staring back was a stranger, but a welcome one. The severe chignon was gone. Her hair now styled in soft, confident waves that framed a face that was no longer placid, but alive with intelligence and intent. The crimson dress hugged her form, a stark contrast to the muted greys and navies that had become her uniform. This was not the woman Alistair expected to walk into his party. This was not the asset he had instructed to wear sapphires. Her phone buzzed. It was a secure message from Mr. Peterson. "The market is closed. All is quiet. The stage is yours, Mrs. Hawthorne. Or should I say, Ms. Beaumont." She smiled. The name felt right. Madeline Beaumont was back. The driver Alistair had sent was waiting downstairs. As she descended in the private elevator, the mirrored walls reflected a queen in red. The nervousness she had expected to feel was absent, replaced by a full, thrilling certainty. Alistair had told her not to be late, but Madeline had no intention of arriving on his schedule. A queen is never late. Everyone else is simply early. She instructed the driver to take a scenic route along the river, a deliberate delay. Her entrance had to be perfectly timed. She wouldn't arrive in Alistair's shadow. She would arrive when the party was in full swing, when all eyes were on her husband, the master of the universe. Only then would she walk in and steal the show. The grand ballroom of the Metropole Hotel was a universe of power and wealth. Crystal chandeliers dripped light onto a sea of black tuxedos and designer gowns. The air hummed with the discreet murmur of billion-dollar deals and influential gossip. At the center of this universe stood Alistair Hawthorne, radiating success. He was holding court near the grand staircase, a glass of champagne in one hand, Bianca Valenti, clad in a glittering silver dress, artfully positioned at his side. He had just glanced at his watch for the third time, a flicker of irritation crossing his face. Madeleine was late. It was unprofessional. He needed her here, playing her part. And then a hush fell over the entrance of the ballroom. It started as a ripple, a few heads turning, and quickly grew into a wave of stunned silence that washed across the entire room. The conversations faltered. The music seemed to fade into the background. Standing at the top of the grand staircase, bathed in the warm glow of the spotlights, was a woman in a breathtaking crimson gown. For a moment, no one recognized her. This woman was a vision of power and confidence. Her head was held high, her gaze sweeping across the room with an unnerving self-possession. The serpent necklace at her throat caught the light, its emerald eyes seeming to glitter with a life of their own. It was Madeleine. Alistair froze the champagne glass, momentarily forgotten in his hand. He stared, his mind struggling to reconcile the demure, quiet woman he had left at home with the spectacular creature commanding the attention of every person in the room. It was as if she had been recast in a different role without his permission. The dress, the hair, the look in her eyes, it was all wrong. It was all a defiant, glorious rebellion. Bianca's perfectly curated smile tightened her eyes, narrowing with instant venomous jealousy. This was not the woman she had so easily dismissed for years. This was a rival. As Madeleine descended the staircase, the silence broke into a flurry of whispers. Is that Madeleine Hawthorne? I've never seen her look like that. My God, what is she wearing? The whispers were not of mockery, but of awe and confusion. She moved not with the timid deference Alistair expected, but with a fluid, deliberate grace. She didn't make her way toward her husband. Instead, she veered to the side, where a small group of the most powerful people in the room were gathered. Robert Vance, the industrialist Alistair had been so keen to impress, a tech mogul named Kenji Tanaka, and the formidable head of the National Banking Commission. Alistair watched his confusion turning to anger as they greeted her not with the polite condescension usually reserved for corporate wives, but with genuine warmth and respect. Tanaka leaned in to kiss her cheek. Vance, the man before whom Alistair had humiliated her, actually bowed his head slightly. "Madeleine, you look magnificent," Vance said, his voice booming with admiration. "Aris Thorne speaks very highly of you." Madeleine gave him a radiant smile. "Aris is a visionary. It's a privilege to be his partner." The words, spoken just loudly enough to be overheard by those nearby, sent another shockwave through the crowd. Partner Alistair started to move toward her, his face a thunderous mask, but he was intercepted by a senator. He was trapped, forced to smile and shake hands while watching his wife, his quiet, decorative wife, hold court with the very people he spent his life trying to impress. She was talking business. She was laughing. She looked more alive than he had ever seen her. Madeleine could feel Alistair's gaze burning into her back, but she ignored it. For the first time, she was not an extension of him. She was the center of her own gravity, and she was pulling the most important people in the room into her orbit. She was no longer a ghost in his machine. She had become a machine of her own. Finally, she turned, and her eyes met Alistair's across the crowded room. She held his gaze, and for the first time there was no fear, no deference, no quiet apology in her eyes. There was only the cool, calm assessment of an equal, or perhaps a superior. She gave him a small, enigmatic smile that didn't reach her eyes. A smile that said, "You have no idea what's coming." Then she turned back to her conversation, dismissing him as easily as he had dismissed her for 5 years. The grand entrance was over. It had been a stunning success, but it was only the overture. The main performance was yet to come. The highlight of the Hawthorne Foundation Gala was the live auction, a spectacle of performative philanthropy, where Alistair would take the stage to rally donations and, more importantly, cement his status as the industry's benevolent king. Tonight he took the microphone with an extra dose of swagger, a desperate attempt to reclaim the spotlight his wife had so unexpectedly stolen. He was charming, witty, and powerful. He spoke of legacy, of ambition, of the future his company was building. He was in his element, the master of his universe, and the room was once again under his spell. Madeline watched from a table near the front, her expression perfectly composed. She sat not with the other corporate wives, but between Kenji Tanaka and Robert Vance, a clear statement of her new allegiance. And now Alistair announced, his voice booming, "We come to our final, most exciting announcement of the evening. As many of you know, Hawthorne Industries is dedicated to progress, and as part of that commitment, we are in the final stages of acquiring Helios Innovations, a company with remarkable potential that we intend to fully integrate into our tech division to create unparalleled synergy." A polite knowing applause rippled through the room. It was the public declaration of his victory. He was putting a flag in the ground. He looked directly at Madeline, a triumphant, challenging glint in his eye, as if to say, "This is my world. This is real power." He then motioned to the gala's host, a well-known journalist. "And to speak more on the future of innovation, I'd like to invite our host back to the stage." The journalist smiled warmly. "Thank you, Alistair. Truly a remarkable vision." He paused, looking down at a card in his hand, with a slightly puzzled expression. "Ladies and gentlemen, I have just been handed an update that appears to be a significant development in that very story. It seems there is another major player in the Helios Innovations deal." A confused murmur spread through the ballroom. Alistair's confident smile faltered. This was not on the program. The host continued, "Helios's board of directors has just released an official statement, effective immediately. They have accepted a partnership and funding agreement from a private investment group that has, over the last 6 months, quietly acquired a 52% controlling stake in the company." The air was sucked out of the room. A controlling stake, that was impossible. Alistair's team had been monitoring every major transaction. This investment, the host read. His voice, filled with drama, will ensure Helios remains an independent entity dedicated to its core mission of sustainable energy. The hostile takeover bid from Hawthorne Industries has been officially rejected. Alistair turned pale. His face, broadcast on the giant screens on either side of the stage, was a mask of disbelief and fury. He had been publicly humiliatingly outmaneuvered. The statement concludes, the host said, looking up at the stunned crowd, by announcing that the new majority shareholder will be taking a public role as the strategic director of the board. The name of the investment group is the Orion Investment Group. He paused for effect. And its principal owner and director is here with us tonight. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Ms. Madeline Beaumont. Checkmate. For a moment there was absolute deafening silence. The collective gasp was felt rather than heard. Alistair looked as if he had been struck by lightning, his eyes locking on his wife. Madeline Beaumont. Not Hawthorne. Beaumont. With unhurried grace, Madeline stood up. The crimson of her dress seemed to burn in the spotlights. She gave a small, polite nod to Tanaka and Vance and walked toward the stage. Her heels clicked on the polished floor, each step a hammer blow to Alistair's ego. She took the microphone from the stunned host. She looked out at the sea of shocked faces, her gaze calm and commanding. And then she looked directly at her husband, who was still standing frozen on the stage just a few feet away. "Thank you," she said, her voice clear and steady, amplified throughout the silent hall. "I have always believed that true progress is not about consumption, but about creation. It's not about acquiring and dismantling, but about building and nurturing. Helios Innovations represents a future, I believe, in a legacy of sustainable technology that my late father, a brilliant engineer himself, would have been proud of. My investment group and I are committed to providing Dr. Thorne and his team with everything they need to change the world." She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Every word was delivered with the precise, devastating force of a wrecking ball. She had not only beaten him, but she had also claimed the moral high ground, tying her victory to her family's legacy and a noble cause. She had exposed his predatory tactics as a thing of the past. "Thank you all for being here tonight to celebrate the future," she concluded. She gave a final dazzling smile to the audience, turned, and walked off the stage, leaving her husband standing alone in the ruins of his triumph, utterly and completely defeated in front of everyone he had ever wanted to impress. The ride back to the penthouse was a study in suffocating silence. Alistair sat rigid on one side of the limousine, his face a granite mask of fury. Madeline sat opposite him, serene and composed, watching the city lights blur past as if it were just another evening. The air between them was thick with unspoken accusations and shattered pride. The moment the penthouse door closed behind them, the fragile truce of silence shattered. "What have you done?" Alistair's voice was a low, dangerous snarl. He tore off his bow tie, his movements jerky with rage. "What in God's name was that?" Madeline calmly slipped off her heels, placing them neatly by the door. She turned to face him, her expression unyielding. "I believe the announcement was quite clear. I saved a company from a predator." "Saved it," he roared, taking a step toward her. "You humiliated me. You went behind my back, conspired against me, and made me a laughingstock in my own ballroom, on my own stage." "Your stage," Madeline countered, her voice dangerously soft. "Was that the same stage where you planned to announce the destruction of a company my father believed in? Or was it the one you shared with your mistress, while your wife was expected to applaud from the audience? You seem to be confused about who owns what, Alistair." The mention of Bianca and her father struck him silent for a second, his rage momentarily short-circuited by the directness of her attack. He had never heard her speak this way. The deference was gone, replaced by a blade of cold steel. "Where did you get the money?" he demanded, his mind racing, trying to piece together the impossible. "I control our finances. You couldn't buy a new car without me knowing about it." "That's where you're wrong," she said, walking toward the windows overlooking the city. "You controlled your finances. You never once bothered to ask about mine. You saw a school teacher's daughter and assumed she came with nothing. You never thought to look deeper." She told him then about her grandmother's inheritance, the secret portfolio that had been growing in silence for years. She explained how every time he had dismissed her, ignored her, or humiliated her, it had fueled her resolve. "You saw a hobbyist," she said, her voice laced with the ice of 5 years of repressed anger. "You saw a decorative, quaint little wife. You never ever saw me. You were so blinded by your own arrogance, you couldn't see the person sleeping next to you. That was your biggest mistake." Alistair stared at her. the pieces finally clicking into place. The late nights she was reading the art catalogues that were delivered her sudden interest in the financial news. It had all been happening right under his nose. The sheer scale of her deception, her strategic brilliance, was both terrifying and, on some deep, unrecognized level, astounding. His fury began to curdle into a different, more complex emotion, a grudging, horrified respect. He had been beaten not by a corporate rival, but by his wife, the woman he thought he owned. So this was all for revenge? He asked, his voice quieter now. To destroy me for sleeping with Bianca Madeline let out a short, sharp laugh, devoid of any humor. Oh, Alistair, you still think the world revolves around you. Bianca was a symptom, not the disease. Your affairs were just another example of your profound disrespect. This wasn't about revenge. Revenge is a fleeting emotional act. This was a strategic realignment. You were a bad investment, so I divested. She turned to face him fully, her eyes clear and resolute. I have no interest in destroying you, but I will not stand by and watch you destroy good people and good ideas for profit. Helios Innovations is now under my protection. You will not touch it. You will issue a public statement tomorrow morning withdrawing your bid and wishing the new leadership well. It wasn't a request. It was an order. The power dynamic in the room, in their entire world, had irrevocably shifted. He was a billionaire, a titan, but she held a controlling interest in the one thing he wanted most, and she had just proven she was a far more cunning player than he was. And us, he finally asked the word, hanging awkwardly in the air. What about us? Madeline looked at him, and for the first time he saw a flicker of the woman he had married, a deep sadness in her eyes. There is no us, Alistair. There hasn't been for a very long time. You just built such a large, gilded cage that it took me a while to find the door. She walked past him, heading toward the guest wing of the penthouse. I'll have my things moved out by the end of the week. My lawyers will be in touch with yours. I suggest you tell them to be cooperative. He was left standing alone in the vast, silent living room, surrounded by the cold, minimalist art that was supposed to represent his success. For the first time, he understood the true meaning of the word bankrupt. He hadn't just lost a deal. He had lost the one person who had been holding his world together in a way he had been too blind to ever appreciate. The ghost in his machine had become the master of it, and she had just turned it off. The days that followed the gala were a brutal education for Alistair Hawthorne. The story of his public defeat was the lead item in every financial journal and gossip column. The narrative was intoxicating: the invisible wife, the secret heiress, the brilliant corporate maneuver. Madeline Beaumont was instantly mythologized as a feminist icon, a strategic genius who had emerged from the shadows. Alistair, conversely, was painted as an arrogant fool, outsmarted by the one person he should have known best. His investors were spooked. His board of directors demanded emergency meetings. The illusion of his invincibility, the very foundation of his power, was shattered. Calls were not being returned. Deals that had been all but certain were suddenly put on hold. The world that had once bent to his will now viewed him with a new critical eye. Bianca Valenti was one of the first rats to leave the sinking ship. She saw that Alistair's social and professional currency had plummeted. Within a week, she had quietly resigned from Hawthorne Industries, releasing a statement about pursuing new opportunities. There was no loyalty in her world, only a ruthless calculation of power, and Alistair was no longer the winning bet. Her departure was a footnote in his cascade of losses, but it was a telling one. True to her word, Madeline moved out of the penthouse. She didn't flee in the night. She arranged for professional movers to come during broad daylight, a calm, orderly, and very public dismantling of their life together. She took only her personal belongings, her books, and a single painting from the collection, not one of the famous expensive ones, but a small, serene landscape she had always loved, one Alistair had deemed insignificant. Alistair, meanwhile, found himself adrift in the echoing silence of the massive apartment. Every room was a monument to his failure. He would catch himself listening for her soft footsteps, for the gentle sound of her turning a page in her study. The silence he had once cultivated as a sign of his dominance now felt like a crushing, unbearable void. Stripped of the sycophants and the distractions, he was forced to confront the truth. He replayed the last 5 years in his mind, but this time he saw it through her eyes. He saw her attempts to connect her intelligent suggestions. He'd brushed aside her quiet dignity in the face of his blatant affairs, her profound loneliness. He had mistaken her grace for weakness, her silence for submission. He had not just ignored her. He had actively tried to diminish her to keep her small, so he could feel large. 2 weeks after the gala, humbled and desperate, he did something he hadn't done in years. He asked to see her, not through lawyers, but directly. He sent her a simple handwritten note. They met in a neutral location, a private room at the gallery where she had once worked. When she walked in, he was struck once again by her transformation. She was wearing a simple but impeccably tailored business dress. The quiet uncertainty was gone, replaced by an aura of calm authority. She was no longer Mrs. Hawthorne, the appendage. She was Madeline Beaumont, the principal. "Thank you for meeting me," he began, his voice strained. "Madeline, I am sorry." The apology hung in the air. It was genuine, born of a painful and profound self-realization. "I was a fool," he continued. "I was arrogant and cruel, and I didn't deserve you. I took your light and tried to hide it because I was afraid it would outshine my own. I see that. Now." Madeline listened, her expression unreadable. She did not offer him the easy comfort of immediate forgiveness. "What do you want, Alistair?" she asked, her tone not unkind, but direct. "I want—" He hesitated. The honest answer was that he wanted her back. He wanted the life he had so carelessly thrown away. But he knew that was impossible. He had broken that beyond repair. So he offered the only thing he had left. "I want to propose a partnership." She raised an eyebrow. "Not a personal one," he clarified quickly. "A professional one. You were right about Helios. My approach was wrong. Your vision is better. You are a better strategist than I am. Hawthorne. Industries is taking a beating. We need a new direction, a new story. A joint venture between Hawthorne and a revitalized Helios. It would be powerful. We could do great things. Together." It was the ultimate concession. He was admitting her superiority and begging for a professional lifeline. He was offering to be her partner on her terms. Madeline considered his proposal for a long moment. The old Madeline would have shrunk from the idea. But she was no longer that woman. She saw the opportunity not to save him, but to leverage his resources for her own goals. With the power of Hawthorne Industries behind Helios, the impact they could make would be magnified tenfold. "I will consider it," she said finally. "I will have my team draw up a preliminary proposal. But Madeline, be very clear on this. I will be the senior partner. The terms will be mine, and my lawyers will oversee every detail. There will be no room for the old ways." Alistair nodded a wave of relief so profound it almost buckled him. It was more than he deserved. Whatever you say, the terms will be yours. He left the gallery that day, a different man, humbled, defeated, but with a flicker of hope. Not for a romantic reconciliation, but for a chance to build something new from the ashes of his arrogance, guided by the woman he had so foolishly underestimated. Madeline watched him go, feeling not triumph, but a quiet sense of closure. Her journey hadn't been about destroying him. It had been about finding herself. She had stepped out of his shadow, not just to be seen, but to finally cast a shadow of her own, one that was long powerful and shaped entirely by her own design. That night at the gala was not an ending, but a spectacular beginning. Madeline Beaumont's story became a legend in the business world, a testament to the quiet power that is so often overlooked. She didn't just win a battle against her husband. She redefined her entire existence, transforming from a silent partner in a lonely marriage to a visionary leader in a competitive industry. Her journey teaches us that true strength isn't always loud. Sometimes it's forged in silence, built in the shadows of neglect, waiting for the perfect moment to step into the light and change the world. She proved that the most valuable asset is not wealth or power, but a sense of self-worth that no one can take from you. What did you think of Madeline's incredible transformation? Have you ever felt underestimated, only to prove everyone wrong? Share your thoughts and stories in the comments below. We love hearing from you. If you were captivated by this story of empowerment and sweet revenge, please give this video a thumbs up. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more unforgettable stories. Click that notification bell so you never miss an update. Thank you for watching. In the quiet suburbs of Crestwood, a young woman named Amelia believed she had finally found a life of simple, ordinary love. 6 months pregnant and deeply in love with her husband, Ethan, she endured the constant scorn of his wealthy family, who saw her as nothing more than a penniless girl from the wrong side of the tracks. They had no idea who she really was. But one cold afternoon, in the city's most exclusive baby boutique, their scorn turns into a horrifying public spectacle. What they don't know is that the woman they are trying to break is more powerful than they could ever imagine, and her secret is about to bring their entire world crashing down. Amelia Thorne traced the condensation on the kitchen window with a fingertip, a small, wistful smile on her face. Outside the autumn leaves of Crestwood were a riot of gold and crimson, painting the quiet middle-class street in warm hues. Their 2-bedroom rented house, with its slightly creaky floorboards and a garden that was more weeds than roses, felt like a sanctuary. It was simple, it was real, and most importantly, it was a life she had chosen. A life where she was just Amelia, a former librarian, a loving wife, and soon a mother. Her husband, Ethan Thorne, walked in, wrapping his arms around her from behind and resting his hands on her burgeoning belly. He smelled of coffee and the crisp morning air. "What's got my 2 favorite people so captivated?" he murmured, kissing the side of her neck. "Just watching the world go by." She sighed contentedly, leaning back against his solid frame. "Thinking about how lucky I am." "I'm the lucky one," he insisted, his voice earnest. "You know that, right, despite everything." Everything was the unspoken word that hung in the air whenever they talked about his family. The Thornes were Crestwood royalty, their name synonymous with a successful regional construction empire built by Ethan's father, Robert. They lived in a sprawling mansion on the other side of town, a place of polished marble, cold gazes, and suffocating expectations. To them, Amelia was a colossal disappointment. She had no pedigree, no trust fund, and no connections that could benefit the Thorne dynasty. She was the librarian their Ivy League-educated son had inexplicably fallen for and married after a whirlwind romance. The matriarch, Beatrice Thorne, made her disdain for Amelia painfully clear. Every Sunday dinner was a trial by fire. Beatrice would comment on Amelia's simple dress sense, her lack of knowledge about the latest stock market trends, or her preference for novels over society galas. Each comment was a perfectly sharpened dart, aimed to remind Amelia that she didn't belong. "Don't let her get to you, Ames," Ethan would always say on the drive home. "She's just from a different generation. She doesn't see you like I do." But Amelia saw the way Ethan's shoulders tensed in his mother's presence, the way he'd offer a weak defense before inevitably falling silent. He loved his mother, and he was terrified of her disapproval. That fear Amelia knew was a chasm between them. What Ethan and his entire family didn't know was that Amelia's simple life was a meticulously crafted illusion. The name she had been born with wasn't Amelia Evans, the fabricated identity of an orphan who'd put herself through state college. Her real name was Amelia Sterling. She was the sole heir to Sterling Enterprises, a global conglomerate with holdings in technology, finance, and real estate that dwarfed the Thornes' local construction business into utter insignificance. The Thornes' mansion could fit inside the foyer of her family's New York penthouse. After her parents' tragic death in a private jet crash when she was 18, Amelia had inherited it all. But the world of corporate takeovers of sycophants and fortune hunters had felt like a prison. She'd watched friends get betrayed by people only interested in their proximity to wealth. She yearned for something genuine. So with the help of her family's most trusted advisor, the fiercely loyal Arthur Finch, she had created a new identity. She'd moved to a city where no one knew her, taken a quiet job at a library, and lived on a modest salary, determined to find someone who would love her for her heart and mind, not her bank account. And she had found Ethan. He was kind, charming, and when it was just the two of them, he made her feel like the most cherished woman in the world. She had fallen for him so deeply that she had convinced herself she could live in this fabricated world forever. Telling him the truth felt like a betrayal of the very foundation their relationship was built on. How could she explain that the financial struggles they'd argued over the broken-down car, the budget for the baby's nursery, were a complete charade on her part? He would feel like a fool, and their love, which she treasured more than any fortune, would be tainted. The ringing of her phone shattered the morning peace. The caller ID flashed Queen Beatrice. Amelia's smile tightened. Ethan saw her expression. Let it go to voicemail. "She'll just keep calling," Amelia said, forcing a cheerful tone. She answered, putting the phone on speaker. "Good morning, Beatrice." "Amelia, I trust you're not still lazing about." Beatrice's clipped, icy voice filled the kitchen. "I have decided we are going to La Petite Chérie this afternoon to select a suitable registry for the baby. My friends will expect a certain standard, and we can't have them thinking the first Thorne grandchild will be swaddled in polyester." Amelia's heart sank. La Petite Chérie was the most ostentatious, ridiculously expensive children's boutique in the city. A single pair of baby booties there cost more than their weekly grocery budget. "Oh, that's very generous, Beatrice, but we were really hoping to keep things simple. We found some lovely things at a little shop downtown." "Nonsense," Beatrice scoffed. "You wouldn't know quality if it slapped you in the face. This is not up for debate. And I've also invited someone to help us. You remember Chloe Preston, don't you? Her taste is simply impeccable." Amelia's blood ran cold. Chloe Preston, Ethan's ex-girlfriend from college, the woman Beatrice had openly championed as the one who got away. Chloe was everything Amelia wasn't: blonde, polished from a family with a comparable if smaller fortune to the Thorns. Inviting her was not a kind gesture. It was a calculated act of cruelty. "Mom, that's not appropriate," Ethan interjected, his voice firm for once. "Why would you invite Chloe?" "Oh, don't be so dramatic, Ethan. Chloe and I are dear friends. She has wonderful insights into what a family like ours needs. It will be helpful. 2:00. Don't be late, Amelia. And for heaven's sake, try to wear something presentable." The line went dead. The silence in the kitchen was heavy. Ethan turned to Amelia, his face a mixture of apology and frustration. "I'm so sorry, Ames. I don't know what she's thinking." "I do," Amelia said softly, her hand instinctively cradling her belly. "She's thinking about how to remind me that I'll never be good enough." She looked at him, her eyes pleading. "Ethan, you have to say something to her. You have to tell her to stop." He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture she knew meant he was stressed and conflicted. "I will. Of course I will. But you know how she is. It's better to just get through it. We'll go smile, let her feel like she's in control, and then we'll come home and laugh about it. It's not worth the fight." His words, meant to be placating, felt like a small betrayal. It was always easier to appease his mother than to defend his wife. Amelia swallowed the bitter taste of disappointment. She knew she had to go. To refuse would only give Beatrice more ammunition, painting her as ungrateful and difficult. She would go, she would endure, and she would count the minutes until she could return to her simple, safe world. She had no idea that the carefully constructed walls of that world were about to be blown apart, and the storm was gathering at the gilded doors of La Petite Chérie. The air inside La Petite Chérie was thick with the scent of lavender potpourri and old money. Everything was cream gold and pastel blue. Sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows, glinting off crystal chandeliers and illuminating displays of hand-stitched cashmere onesies and miniature velvet rocking horses. It wasn't a store. It was a museum for the children of the 1%. Amelia felt a familiar wave of unease wash over her. It wasn't the opulence that bothered her. She had grown up surrounded by far greater luxury. It was the pretense. This world which Beatrice and Chloe navigated with the effortless grace of sharks in their natural habitat felt alien and suffocating. She smoothed down her simple navy blue maternity dress, suddenly feeling frumpy and out of place, just as Beatrice had intended. Beatrice and Chloe were already there, perched on a plush settee like a pair of regal vultures sipping sparkling water from delicate flutes. Beatrice was immaculate in a Chanel tweed suit, her silver hair perfectly coiffed. Chloe, a vision in a silk blouse and designer jeans, looked Amelia up and down with a pitying smile that didn't reach her cold, calculating eyes. "Amelia, darling, you made it," Beatrice said, her tone dripping with false sweetness. "We were just discussing cribs. The Versailles collection is simply to die for. Hand-carved mahogany with 24-carat gold leaf accents." She gestured towards a monstrously ornate crib that looked more like a papal throne than a place for a baby to sleep. It probably cost more than Ethan's car. "It's very grand," Amelia managed, forcing a polite smile. "But I was hoping for something a little more understated. Simpler." Chloe let out a tinkling, condescending laugh. "Oh, Amelia, you have to think about the optics. The first Thorn grandchild can't sleep in something from a chain store. It sends the wrong message." "What message is that?" Amelia asked, her voice quiet but firm. That his parents love him for who he is, not what he's surrounded by. Beatrice's smile tightened. The message is that his family has standards, something you seem determined to ignore. She stood up, gliding over to a rack of tiny outfits. Now let's look at a coming-home outfit. Chloe, dear, you have such an eye for these things. For the next hour, Amelia was subjected to a masterclass in psychological warfare. Beatrice and Chloe moved through the store, picking up exorbitantly priced items and discussing them as if Amelia wasn't there. They talked about the importance of Italian leather shoes for a newborn who couldn't walk a sterling silver rattle that was a family heirloom in the making, and a stroller collaboration between a high-fashion house and a German engineering firm. Every suggestion Amelia made was immediately shot down with a condescending remark. Oh no, dear. Cotton is so pedestrian. We need Sea Island cotton at the very least. A wooden high chair. How utterly rustic. No, it must be the transparent acrylic one, so much more chic. Ethan, who had arrived a few minutes after Amelia, stood awkwardly by the door, trying and failing to steer the conversation towards something more reasonable. Mom, maybe we should look at the price tags, he suggested weakly at one point. Don't be vulgar, Ethan, Beatrice snapped without looking at him. Price is not a concern when it comes to my grandchild. Amelia felt a growing sense of isolation. She watched Ethan, hoping he would put his foot down, draw a line in the sand, and defend their right to raise their child as they saw fit. But he just fidgeted, offering placating smiles and non-committal shrugs. He was a spectator at his own wife's humiliation. The situation escalated when Chloe picked up a delicate hand-embroidered christening gown. This is it, Beatrice. It's perfect, classic, elegant. It's the kind of thing that gets passed down through generations. It's beautiful, Beatrice agreed, her eyes gleaming. She turned to Amelia. We'll take this, of course. Amelia looked at the tag discreetly. $5,000 for an outfit a baby would wear for 2 hours. It was obscene. Beatrice, that's incredibly generous, but we can't accept that, Amelia said, her voice strained. It's far too much. Nonsense, it's a gift, Beatrice said dismissively. It's not just the money, Amelia insisted, her patience wearing thin. It's not us. We want our child to grow up with grounded values, to understand the worth of things, not just the price. Chloe scoffed, stepping closer. What would you know about values? From what I hear, your entire life has been about latching onto people with more than you. First a scholarship, then a man with a promising future. This is just the next logical step, isn't it? Securing the Thorn inheritance for your child. The accusation, so blatant and venomous, struck Amelia like a physical blow. She felt the blood drain from her face. She looked at Ethan, her eyes silently screaming at him to intervene, to say something to stop this. Ethan cleared his throat. Chloe, that's out of line. It was the weakest defense imaginable. There was no anger in his voice, no outrage. It was a polite reprimand, like telling a child not to run indoors. Chloe just smirked, emboldened by his weakness. Is it? Or is it the truth everyone's thinking, but is too polite to say, Beatrice just wants to ensure her grandchild has the best of everything, something its mother clearly can't provide and doesn't appreciate? That's enough, Amelia said, her voice trembling with a mixture of hurt and rising anger. You know nothing about me. I know that you showed up out of nowhere and trapped a man who was destined for so much more. Chloe hissed, her voice low and menacing. You're a leech, Amelia, and sooner or later everyone is going to see it. The store had grown quiet. A sales associate, hovered nervously nearby, pretending to adjust a display of baby bonnets. Beatrice watched the exchange with a look of smug satisfaction. This was exactly what she had wanted. She had orchestrated this confrontation to break Amelia, to prove to Ethan that he had made a terrible mistake. Amelia felt the sting of tears behind her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. She would not give them the satisfaction. She looked at her husband, the man she had given up her world, for the man who was supposed to be her partner and protector. He stood there frozen, his face pale, trapped between the woman he married and the woman who raised him. And in his silence, she felt a profound and devastating crack form in the foundation of her love. "I need some air," she whispered, turning to leave. Her hands were shaking. The weight of her secret of the double life she was leading pressed down on her, making it hard to breathe. All she had ever wanted was love, pure and simple. But in that moment, surrounded by a fortune that was a pittance compared to her own, she had never felt so utterly poor. The storm had not just gathered. It had broken, and she was standing in the heart of it, completely alone. As Amelia turned to walk away, her legs unsteady, Beatrice stepped forward, blocking her path. The older woman's face was a mask of cold triumph. "Running away," Beatrice said, her voice loud enough for the other patrons in the boutique to hear. "How typical. You can't handle a simple discussion about what's best for your own child." "This isn't a discussion," Amelia retorted, her voice shaking but gaining a steely edge. "This is an ambush, and I will not be a part of it." She tried to step around Beatrice, but Chloe moved to her other side, hemming her in. The two women stood like prison guards, their expensive perfumes mingling in a cloying, suffocating cloud. "Don't be so dramatic," Chloe purred, picking a piece of imaginary lint from Amelia's dress. "We're just trying to help you. It must be so overwhelming trying to fit into a world you're not accustomed to. All these choices, all these prices." She let the last word hang in the air, a deliberate insult. A well-dressed woman browsing nearby glanced over her expression, a mixture of curiosity and pity. The sales associates were now openly staring. Amelia felt a hot flush of shame creep up her neck. This was a public spectacle, and she was the main attraction. "I am perfectly capable of choosing items for my own baby," Amelia stated, her jaw tight. "And I don't need help from you." "Oh, I think you do," Chloe said, her voice turning sharp and cruel. She gestured around the store. "You walk in here in your sensible little dress, looking at things you could never possibly afford. Are you hoping that if you just stand near them long enough, some of the class will rub off? Or are you just trying to figure out which items you can pressure Ethan into buying so you can sell them later?" The accusation was so vile, so utterly baseless, that it momentarily stunned Amelia into silence. Beatrice seized the opportunity, addressing the store manager, who was now cautiously approaching. "Danielle, I do apologize for the scene. My daughter-in-law is under some strain. She's not used to this kind of environment. I'm afraid she may be feeling a little lightheaded." It was a masterful move, painting Amelia as not only poor, but emotionally unstable. Danielle, the manager, gave Amelia a nervous professional smile. "Of course, Mrs. Thorne. Can I get you a glass of water, ma'am?" What she needs is a reality check. Chloe snapped, her patience for the charade gone. She snatched a glass of sparkling water from a nearby tray, and with a flick of her wrist, accidentally, sloshed its contents down the front of Amelia's navy dress. The cold liquid soaked through the fabric instantly, and Amelia gasped, stumbling back. The dress, now dark and wet, clung uncomfortably to her baby bump. It was a petty juvenile act, but in the context of the public setting, it was utterly debasing. "Oh, clumsy me," Chloe exclaimed with theatrical shock, though her eyes danced with malicious glee. "I'm so sorry. That's it," Ethan finally said, his voice cracking with a mix of anger and panic as he rushed forward. "We're leaving. Chloe, that was uncalled for." "Oh, relax, Ethan," Beatrice said, waving a dismissive hand. "It's just water. It will dry. Amelia is being overly sensitive." But it wasn't just water. It was the final stinging drop in an ocean of humiliation. Amelia looked down at her ruined dress, at the smug faces of the two women who despised her, and then at her husband. He was holding out a hand to her, but his eyes were darting around the store, more concerned with the audience than with her. He wanted to defuse the situation, to escape the embarrassment. He wasn't defending her honor. He was managing a public relations crisis. In that moment, something inside Amelia, something she had been carefully protecting, finally shattered. The fantasy of their simple, perfect life evaporated, revealing the ugly truth beneath. She had made herself small and powerless for this man, and when she needed him most, he was not her shield. He was just another bystander. With a newfound, chilling calm, she ignored Ethan's outstretched hand. She looked directly at Beatrice, her voice low and steady, devoid of the tremor it held just moments before. "You have no idea what you've just done." Beatrice let out a short, sharp laugh. "Is that a threat?" "From you, don't be ridiculous. What could you possibly do?" "Complain to Ethan." "Cut up my credit cards for this registry." The store manager, Danielle, looking deeply uncomfortable, stepped between them. "Perhaps we should all just take a moment. I think you should be careful who you're speaking to." "Danielle," Chloe interjected, pointing a manicured finger at Amelia. "This woman is clearly unstable. For all we know, she could be trying to cause a scene to get something for free. You should probably check her bag on the way out." The suggestion that she was a potential shoplifter was the final unforgivable blow. The humiliation was complete. It burned in her cheeks and coiled like a snake in her stomach. Amelia didn't say another word. She met Ethan's panicked gaze one last time, and what he saw in her eyes made him flinch. The warmth, the adoration, the gentle love he took for granted, it was all gone. In its place was a vast, cold emptiness that mirrored the Arctic chill in her voice. She turned on her heel, her back ramrod straight. She walked past the displays of ludicrously expensive baby clothes, past the gawking customers and the nervous staff. She didn't run. She walked with a slow, deliberate grace that was more powerful than any outburst. Every head turned to watch her, this heavily pregnant woman in a soaking wet dress, leaving a trail of stunned silence in her wake. When she reached the heavy glass doors, she pushed them open and stepped out into the bright, indifferent afternoon sunlight. She did not look back. She took out her phone, her fingers moving with unshakable purpose across the screen. She selected a number from her contacts, a name Ethan had never seen, and pressed the call button. The phone was answered on the first ring. "Arthur," she said, her voice as clear and hard as a diamond. "It's me." There was a pause on the other end, then a voice calm and deeply respectful. "Amelia, is everything all right?" "No," she replied. The city sounds of Crestwood fading into a dull hum in her ears. "I'm done. I want you to come here. Right now. And I want you to bring everything. It's time for the Thorns to learn who they've been dealing with." Less than 15 minutes later, a sleek black Rolls-Royce Phantom purred to a stop in front of La Petite Cherie, its presence on the quaint, boutique-lined street as subtle as a thunderclap. The car was so profoundly out of place that it brought traffic to a near standstill. Pedestrians stopped and stared, pulling out their phones to take pictures. Back inside the boutique, the atmosphere was thick with a strange mix of residual tension and awkwardness. Beatrice and Chloe were attempting to resume their shopping, their voices artificially bright, but the energy of their victory had dissipated. Ethan stood by the window, pale and agitated repeatedly, trying to call Amelia's phone, only to be sent to voicemail each time. The store manager, Danielle, hovered nearby, unsure of what to do. The boutique's glass door swung open, and a man in his late 50s stepped inside. He was dressed in a bespoke Savile Row suit that fit him like a second skin. His silver hair was neatly combed, his posture was impeccable, and he exuded an aura of quiet, unassailable authority. This was Arthur Finch, the CEO of the Sterling family office, and the man who had been Amelia's guardian mentor and fiercest protector since her parents' death. He was followed by two other individuals in similarly sharp business attire, a man and a woman who carried leather portfolios. Arthur's gaze swept across the store, coolly assessing the scene before his eyes landed on Beatrice and Chloe. He then glanced at the large dark stain on the floor, where Amelia had stood, and his expression, already stern, hardened into granite. "May I help you?" Danielle, the manager, asked, approaching him hesitantly. "I'm here to see my employer," Arthur said, his voice calm but resonant, commanding the attention of everyone in the room. He walked directly towards the small group. Beatrice looked him up and down with a disdainful frown. "I believe you're mistaken. We haven't hired any new staff." Arthur ignored her completely. His eyes locked onto Ethan. "Mr. Thorne, I am Arthur Finch. I am here on behalf of my employer and your wife, Amelia Sterling." The name hung in the air, electric and foreign. Ethan just stared, his mind struggling to process the words. "Sterling, I don't understand." "Her name is Thorne." It was Evans. Evans was a name of convenience, Arthur stated flatly. A name she adopted to live a life of peace and anonymity. A life she hoped would allow her to be loved for herself, not for her name or her net worth. It appears she was tragically mistaken. Chloe let out a derisive snort. "Sterling. What is this, some kind of joke? Did she hire an actor to come and scare us?" How pathetic. Arthur turned his piercing gaze on her. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. "Ms. Chloe Preston, daughter of Edward Preston of Preston Real Estate. Your father's company is currently seeking a $60 million bridge loan from North Star Bank to finance your new condominium project, the Summit at Crestwood Heights. Is that correct?" Chloe's smug expression faltered. "How do you know that?" "I know that," Arthur said, opening his portfolio with a soft click. "Because Sterling Financial Group is the majority shareholder of North Star Bank. As of 10 minutes ago, on the authority of Ms. Sterling, your loan application has been permanently denied due to character concerns regarding your company's associates." He slid a document across the counter to her. "Here is the official notification." Chloe's face went white as a sheet. She snatched the paper, her hands trembling as she read it. Arthur then turned his attention to Beatrice, who was watching him with a mixture of disbelief and dawning horror. "Mrs. Beatrice Thorne, your husband's company." Thorne Construction was recently awarded the exclusive contract for the infrastructure development of the new Sterling Technologies corporate campus being built just outside this city. It is, I believe, the largest contract in your company's history. A company maker, I believe Robert called it. Beatrice's jaw went slack. The Sterling campus was the talk of the town, a multi-billion-dollar project that was going to transform the regional economy. That contract, Arthur continued, his voice dropping to a glacial chill, contained a standard morality clause. Given your public harassment and assault of a senior executive and principal owner of Sterling Enterprises, namely your daughter-in-law, you are in breach. The contract is hereby terminated effective immediately. All Thorn assets and personnel are to be off-site by morning. He placed another document in front of her. Our legal team will be in touch regarding the recovery of our initial mobilization payments. No, Beatrice whispered, shaking her head. No, this can't be. Oh, but it is, Arthur said. And finally, this charming little boutique, La Petite Chérie. He looked at Danielle, the manager, who seemed to have shrunk by several inches. A lovely establishment. So lovely, in fact, that Ms. Sterling's private equity firm, Sterling Capital, acquired the parent company that owns this retail chain 6 months ago. As the new beneficial owner, Miss Sterling is exercising her right to terminate your franchise agreement due to your staff's failure to ensure a safe and respectful environment for all customers. Particularly, he added with a pointed look, the owner. The room was utterly silent, save for the sound of Chloe's ragged breathing. The power dynamic had not just shifted. It had been annihilated in a nuclear blast of wealth and influence so vast it was incomprehensible. Ethan finally found his voice, a strangled, desperate sound. Where is she? Where is Amelia? Arthur looked at him with an expression of profound disappointment. She is where she should have been all along, surrounded by people who protect her, not by those who stand by and watch as she is humiliated. He turned to his associates. Please ensure all parties receive their copies, and have security escort Mrs. Thorne and Ms. Preston from the premises. They are no longer welcome here. 2 security guards who had entered discreetly behind Arthur moved forward. Beatrice looked as if she might faint. Her entire world, her social standing, her family's fortune, her legacy had been dismantled in under 5 minutes by a man she had mistaken for a chauffeur. As the guards led a protesting Chloe and a shell-shocked Beatrice out of the store, Arthur turned back to Ethan. The cold professional mask dropped for a moment, revealing a flicker of something almost paternal. She loved you, Mr. Thorne. She gave up a world you cannot even begin to imagine just for the simple hope that your love was real. She wanted a husband, not a bodyguard. But she at least deserved an ally. And you failed her. You failed her and your unborn child. Arthur turned and walked towards the door, his footsteps echoing in the cavernous silence of the now tainted boutique. Ethan stood alone, a receipt for his failure in his hand, surrounded by the opulent baby things he could no longer afford, his mind reeling with the name that changed everything, Amelia Sterling. He had not married a poor librarian. He had married an empress, and he had just stood by and watched as the world threw mud at her throne. The fallout was immediate and catastrophic. For Ethan, the world tilted on its axis. He stumbled out of the boutique into the harsh sunlight, the name Amelia Sterling echoing in his mind like a mantra of his own stupidity. He called her again and again. Voicemail. He sent a frantic barrage of texts. Ames, please. I don't understand. We need to talk. I'm so sorry. I love you. The single grey check mark next to each message told him his number had been blocked. He drove home to their small rented house in a daze. The creaky floorboards he used to find charming now felt like a mockery. The simple furniture they'd picked out together at thrift stores seemed like props in a play where he was the only one who didn't know his lines. Her scent lingered. Yeah, lavender and old books, and it was an agonizing reminder of the woman he had lost. Every object was a testament to the lie she had lived, and the truth he had been too blind to see. The worn-out sofa where they'd cuddled the chipped mugs, they drank coffee from the stack of books on her nightstand. It was all part of the Amelia Evans costume. A costume she had worn for him. His phone rang, jarring him from his stupor. It was his father, Robert Thorne. His voice wasn't angry. It was hollow, defeated. "Ethan, what did you do? Dad, Don't," Robert cut him off. "I just got off the phone with Arthur Finch's legal department. It's real, son. The Sterling contract is gone. They're calling in our credit lines. Her bank froze our operating accounts. We're ruined, Ethan. Decades of work gone. Because your mother couldn't be civil to your wife. Because you let it happen." The weight of his father's words crushed him. This wasn't just about his marriage anymore. He had allowed his mother's petty cruelty to detonate a bomb that had vaporized his family's legacy. He spent the rest of the day in a frantic haze trying to piece things together. A quick search for Amelia Sterling opened a digital Pandora's box. There she was in photos from years ago, on the arm of her father, the legendary titan of industry David Sterling. Pictured at charity galas in Paris, ribbon-cutting ceremonies in Tokyo, and economic forums in Davos. Her face was younger, her eyes guarded, but it was unmistakably her. The articles called her the vanished heiress, the billion-dollar ghost, speculating for years about where she had gone after her parents' death. She hadn't vanished. She had been hiding in plain sight with him. Meanwhile, Beatrice and Chloe were experiencing their own personal apocalypses. Beatrice arrived home to find her husband, Robert, a man she had dominated for 30 years, looking at her with pure, unadulterated contempt. The shouting match that ensued was legendary, its echoes felt by the household staff, who suddenly began polishing their resumes. The foundation of their marriage, built on wealth and social status, crumbled now that both were gone. For Chloe, the humiliation was more public. The news of her father's loan denial spread through the tight-knit real estate community like wildfire. The Summit project, her pet endeavor, was dead on arrival. Her father, a proud and ruthless businessman, was apoplectic. The phone call she received from him was not one of fatherly concern, but of cold commercial fury. She had cost him a fortune and made an enemy of a financial power he didn't even know was in the game. Her social standing, propped up by the illusion of influence, evaporated overnight. Friends stopped answering her calls. Party invitations were rescinded. She was a pariah. The story, as it always does in wealthy circles, began to leak. Whispers turned into gossip, and gossip turned into a full-blown scandal. The tale of how Beatrice Thorne and Chloe Preston had publicly humiliated a pregnant woman in a baby boutique, only to discover she was the secret billionaire who owned the store. The bank and the contract that kept their families afloat was too delicious not to share. The Thornes became a laughingstock, a cautionary tale whispered over champagne and canapes at the country club they would soon no longer be able to afford. That evening, consumed by a desperate soul-crushing guilt, Ethan drove to his parents' mansion. He found his mother sitting alone in the cavernous living room, a glass of untouched brandy in her hand, staring blankly at the dark fireplace. "He's going to leave me," she said, her voice brittle. "Your father. After 40 years. He said I've destroyed everything." Ethan felt a flicker of pity, but it was quickly extinguished by the memory of Amelia's face in the boutique. "You did, Mum," he said, his own voice hollow. "You destroyed it. You pushed and you bullied and you tormented the kindest, most gentle person I have ever known. For what?" Because she wasn't rich enough for you. Beatrice looked up at him, her eyes red-rimmed and filled with a venomous fury. She lied to us. She deceived all of us. She played us for fools. No. Ethan yelled, his control finally snapping. She wasn't playing us. She was testing us. She gave up everything to see if someone could love her for who she was, not for what she had. She gave me that chance, and I failed. But you couldn't stand the thought of her being happy. You had to tear her down, because she wasn't from your world. The irony is, her world is so far above yours, you can't even comprehend it. You were a bug trying to insult a star. He sank into a chair opposite her, the fight draining out of him, replaced by a vast, empty sorrow. I love her, Mom. I love her so much, and I let this happen. I stood there, and I let you and Chloe tear her apart. And now she's gone. I've lost her. I've lost my child. The realization hit him with the force of a physical blow. His child, a son or daughter who would be born into a world of unimaginable privilege, a world he was no longer a part of, a child who would know him only as the man who failed their mother. The reckoning was not just financial, it was moral. Ethan Thorne finally understood the true nature of his weakness. It wasn't just about his fear of his mother. It was a fundamental flaw in his own character. He had valued peace over principle, comfort over courage. He had loved Amelia, yes, but he had not cherished her. He had not protected her, and in the world of the truly powerful, a world, Amelia Sterling inhabited, such failures were not easily forgiven. He had lost his wife, his family's fortune, and his self-respect in a single afternoon. The price of his silence had been everything. While the Thorne family's world imploded, Amelia Sterling's world was being meticulously reassembled. She wasn't at one of her family's sprawling estates in the Hamptons or a secluded villa in Lake Como. She was in a place that felt more like home than any of them, the penthouse apartment atop the Sterling Enterprises headquarters in downtown Crestwood, a sleek tower of glass and steel that she had commissioned herself. The apartment was a masterpiece of minimalist design, all clean lines, neutral colors, and breathtaking panoramic views of the city. Yet it felt sterile, impersonal. It was a fortress, not a home. For the first few days, Amelia did very little. She ate the meals her private chef prepared. She listened to the updates from Arthur about the swift and total dismantling of the Thornes' financial standing, and she spent hours sitting by the window, one hand on her belly, watching the tiny cars move along the streets below. She didn't feel triumph or vindication. She felt a profound, aching emptiness. The simple life she had craved had been a beautiful dream, but the ending was a nightmare. The man she loved had failed her in the most fundamental way. The revelation of her identity wasn't a gotcha moment. It was the tragic admission of a failed experiment. She had wanted to be loved for herself, and the test results were in she wasn't. Or at least her husband's love wasn't strong enough to withstand the slightest pressure. On the fourth day, Arthur Finch found her in the expansive home office, staring at a blank computer screen. "The Thorne accounts are settled," he said gently. "We've left them with the mansion and a modest pension for Robert. They won't starve, but their influence is gone." Amelia nodded, not looking at him. "And Ethan? He has been trying to reach you through every conceivable channel. He's left messages with my office, with the legal team, even with the building's concierge. They are remorseful. Remorse is easy when you've lost everything," she said, her voice flat. It's courage that's hard. Arthur stood there for a moment, his posture softening. Amelia, what he did was unforgivable. But you loved him. This pain you're feeling, locking yourself away, will not make it disappear. I'm not locking myself away, she said, finally, turning to look at him. For the first time in days, there was a spark in her eyes, not of joy, but of resolve. I'm preparing. I'm about to be a single mother. I am the head of a global corporation. I don't have the luxury of falling apart. From that day on, a change came over her. She stopped grieving for the life she had lost and started building a new one. She summoned her top executives, men and women, who hadn't seen her in person for over 2 years. When she walked into the boardroom, her pregnancy evident beneath a tailored but comfortable dress, a hush fell over the room. They saw the same brilliant mind they remembered, but there was a new hardness in her eyes, a new economy in her words. This was not the vanished heiress. This was the queen returned to claim her throne. She delved into the company's projects with a ferocious intensity. She reviewed quarterly reports, challenged development strategies, and made decisions with a clarity and speed that left her board members breathless. She was particularly focused on the Sterling Foundation, the company's charitable arm. She tripled its funding, directing a massive new initiative to build and support shelters for single mothers and victims of domestic abuse. She poured her pain into purpose. Ethan, meanwhile, was living in his own personal hell. He had moved out of their rented house, unable to bear the memories, and was staying in a small, soulless corporate apartment his father had kept. He wrote letters to Amelia every day, long, rambling pages filled with apologies, explanations, and desperate pleas for a second chance. He knew she would never receive them, but he had to write them. He tried to understand her. He thought about the sacrifices she had made. She who could have anything in the world had chosen to live in a drafty house, to worry about grocery bills, to wear a simple dress from a department store. She had done it all for him, for the chance at a normal life. And he had repaid her by allowing his mother and his ex-girlfriend to humiliate her over the price of a baby blanket. The shame was a physical thing, a constant weight in his chest. Realizing that apologies were meaningless without action, he started to change his life. He refused any further financial help from his father. He sold his expensive car, the one his mother had bought him as a graduation present. He took the menial entry-level job at a rival construction company that his father's now tarnished name could get him a site assistant, fetching coffee and running blueprints. The work was hard, the pay was low, and his new colleagues looked at him with a mixture of pity and suspicion. But for the first time in his life, he was earning his own way. He was becoming the man he should have been all along. One evening, after a grueling 10-hour shift, he saw a news report on the TV in a bar. It was a local feature on a surprise visit to a new women's shelter downtown. The benefactor was making an appearance, and then she was on the screen. It was Amelia. She looked regal, confident, and breathtakingly beautiful. She moved with a purpose and grace that stole the air from his lungs. She was speaking to a group of women, her hand resting on her stomach, and she was smiling. It was a real smile, one he hadn't seen in so long. "Every person deserves a safe space," she was saying to the reporter. "A place where they are protected, valued, and given the strength to build a new future for themselves and their children. Strength isn't about how much you have. It's about what you do when you have nothing left." Watching her, Ethan finally understood. Amelia wasn't a damsel in distress waiting to be rescued. Her strength wasn't in her billions, it was in her character, the very thing he had failed to show. She was building a new world for herself and their child, a world founded on real strength and purpose. And if he ever wanted to be a part of it, even on the outermost fringes, he couldn't just say he was sorry. He would have to become a man worthy of her. The path to redemption was long, and he had only just taken the first step. 3 months passed. The seasons turned, and the chill of autumn gave way to the crisp, cold air of winter. Crestwood was decorated for the holidays. But for Ethan, there was no cheer. His life had found a new, monotonous rhythm wake before dawn work, a physically demanding job come home to an empty apartment and write another letter to Amelia that he knew she would never read. He had lost weight, and his hands, once soft from an office job, were now calloused and rough. He was tired, but it was a clean kind of tired. For the first time, he felt like he was building something real, even if it was just a small piece of his own shattered self-respect. He kept track of Amelia through the news. He saw the announcements from the Sterling Foundation, the glowing profiles in business magazines, hailing her return as a visionary leader. Every image of her poised and powerful was a knife to his heart. She was thriving not in spite of him, but in his absence. He was a footnote in her story. His chance, when it came, was not one he sought. One Saturday, he was volunteering with a crew from his new job, helping to do some pro bono repair work at the very women's shelter Amelia had opened. He was on a ladder, patching a section of drywall, when a familiar black Rolls-Royce pulled up outside. His heart hammered against his ribs. Amelia stepped out of the car, followed by Arthur Finch. She was heavily pregnant now, her due date clearly approaching. She wore a simple but elegant cashmere coat, and she moved with the slow, careful grace of late pregnancy. She hadn't seen him. He almost scrambled down the ladder to hide, but something stopped him. Hiding was what the old Ethan would have done. He stayed where he was, his heart pounding, and continued his work. He could hear her voice as she toured the facility, her tone warm and engaged as she spoke with the shelter's director. Eventually, her tour brought her to the hallway where he was working. "And the repairs on this wing are coming along wonderfully," the director was saying. "A local construction company has been donating their time on weekends. Their men work incredibly hard." Amelia stopped, her eyes scanning the work, and then she saw him. Their gazes locked across the hallway. For a long moment, the world seemed to stop. He saw a flicker of surprise in her eyes, then something unreadable. Not anger, not pity, but a deep, quiet watchfulness. He looked a mess. He was covered in drywall dust, his hair was matted with sweat, and his clothes were spattered with paint. He looked nothing like the polished man she had married. He slowly climbed down the ladder, his heart in his throat. Arthur Finch took a half-step forward, his hand instinctively moving as if to shield her, but Amelia subtly raised a hand to stop him. "Ethan," she said. Her voice was calm, neutral. "Amelia," he croaked, his own voice raspy. I didn't know you would be here. This is one of my projects. I visit often," she replied. She looked at his hands, at his work clothes. "The director tells me you're a volunteer." "My company is," he clarified. "I'm just one of the crew. It's a good place. They do important work." The small talk felt absurd, like two strangers making conversation in an elevator. An uncomfortable silence fell between them. He had 1,000 things to say, 1,000 apologies rehearsed in the lonely darkness of his apartment. But looking at her now, so serene and self-possessed, words felt cheap and inadequate. So instead of speaking, he reached into the back pocket of his dusty jeans and pulled out a worn, slightly crumpled envelope. It was the first letter he had written, the one he had carried with him every day, like a penance. He held it out to her. "I know you don't want to hear from me," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "And I don't expect you to read this. I don't expect anything. But I needed you to have it. It says everything I was too weak and too stupid to say before." She looked at the envelope, then back at his face. She saw the exhaustion in his eyes, the genuine remorse etched into the new lines around them. She saw a man who had been stripped of his privilege and had not, to her surprise, crumbled. Slowly she reached out and took the envelope. Her fingers brushed his, and the brief contact sent a jolt through him. "The baby is due in 3 weeks," she said softly, changing the subject. "It's a girl." Tears sprang to Ethan's eyes, and he hastily wiped them away with a dusty hand. "A girl," he whispered. Is she healthy?" "She's strong," Amelia said, and a small, sad smile touched her lips. "Like her mother." It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't an invitation back into her life. But it was something. It was a door, once slammed shut and bolted, being cracked open just a sliver. "I want her to have a father, Ethan." Amelia continued, her gaze unwavering. "But she needs a father who is a good man. A strong man. Not a man who is afraid of his mother or of what people think. A man who stands up for what is right, no matter how hard it is." "I'm trying," he said, his voice breaking. "Amelia, I swear I am trying to be that man." She held his gaze for a moment longer, then gave a slight nod. "I'll read your letter," she said. She turned to Arthur. "We should go." As she walked away, Ethan stood rooted to the spot, watching her go. He hadn't gotten his wife back. He hadn't fixed the damage he had done. But he had been seen. She had seen his effort. And for the first time in months, a tiny, fragile seed of hope began to take root in the barren wasteland of his heart. The road ahead was uncertain. A shared love had been shattered by a terrible betrayal. But now, with the impending arrival of their daughter, there was a reason to build something new from the wreckage. Not a return to the past, but a new beginning, founded not on a beautiful lie, but on a difficult, hard-earned truth. It would be a future built on her terms, guided by her strength, and he knew with every fiber of his being that he would spend the rest of his life trying to be worthy of it. That afternoon wasn't a fairy tale ending, but the start of a new, more honest chapter. Ethan's journey was far from over, and Amelia's trust was not something easily won back. But with a child on the way, their story was no longer just about them. It became a story of redemption, of earning a place in his daughter's life, and of proving that a person can truly change. Amelia, now a powerful leader and a soon-to-be mother, would navigate this new path with the same strength and grace she had shown all along, building a future on her own terms. What do you think? Can someone who has failed so spectacularly ever truly redeem themselves? Can trust once so completely broken ever be rebuilt? This story is a reminder that our true character isn't shown in our best moments, but in how we react when we are at our worst. If this story moved you, please hit that like button. Share it with someone who loves a powerful comeback story, and be sure to subscribe to our channel for more real-life drama that will keep you on the edge of your seat. Drop a comment below and let us know if you think Ethan deserves a second chance.